bo día, benvidos, benvidas. Vedika, it's a great honor having you here with us today. Thank you very much. Tiene la palabra Marta Rey García, directora de la Cátedra Inditex UDC de Sostenibilidad Social.
Muchísimas gracias, presidente. Autoridades, representantes da UDC, de Inditex, Vedika. On behalf of the Inditex UDC chair team, we are honored to welcome today Vedika Bhandarkar. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Water.org, and I believe there's a perfect fit between the type of challenges and interventions that Water.org tackles and the vision of sustainability and social innovation that the chair endorses and promotes through its academic activities. In particular, I'm referring to its postgraduate degree program and to the service learning projects that we develop with organizations in our community. On the side of grand challenges, both Water.org and the chair aim at tackling global problems with systemic roots. As far as SDG 6 is concerned, and according to United Nations, more than 2,000 million people in the world lack access to safe water and sanitation services. This inequality in access to water brutally impacts the livelihoods, the economic and the health conditions of these people. Furthermore, it is also connected to other sustainability imbalances like poverty, climate change, or gender equality. In the case of women and girls, the need to collect water on their own is just another additional barrier to their dignity and educational opportunities. On the side of solutions, both initiatives try to explore innovative solutions based on partnerships and with a local impact. The case of Water.org paradigms collaboration between partners, donors, development aid, financial institutions, local contractors, and technical assistance, all oriented towards empowering women and local communities to become leaders in that collective process of social change. Thanks so very much, Vedika, for sharing today your inspiring projects with our students. And thanks, of course, to Inditex for making this opportunity at all possible in the University of A Coruña. Thanks so much.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, profesora Marta Rey. Tengo ahora a palabra Manuel Gómez Suárez, decano desta Facultad de Economía e Empresa, a quen aproveito para agradecerlle a súa hospitalidade e apoio de sempre a cátedra.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome you to the Faculty of Economics and Business of the University of A Coruña, and thank you for being here today, accompanying us in this act. I would also like to thank the Inditex UDC chair and its director, Marta Rey, for the interest and topicality of the organized activities, and also the Social Council and its president, Antonio Abril, and Inditex and its Chief Sustainability Officer, Javier Losada, for their continuous and fruitful collaboration with the University of A Coruña in general, and with this faculty in particular. How many times we can say that we are in the presence of an action that is contributing to change the world? Today, I think it's one of those times. The Inditex UDC Sustainability Chair gives us the opportunity to first-hand know the activity of Water.org through its Chief Operating Officer, Vedika Bhandarkar. For me, it will be a pleasure to attend her presentation, and I am honored to be able to do it from this table. I hope you will enjoy this conference as much as I intend to do so. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, decano. Tengo ahora a palabra Javier Losada, director de Sostenibilidad de Inditex.
Thank you very much. Authorities, Dean, colleagues on the table, ladies and gentlemen, good day to all of you. Buenos días a todos. Buenos días. Allow me to use my first words today to show my deepest gratitude to our keynote speaker, Vedika Bhandarkar, for her participation at the second edition of the series of talks of Inditex UDC Sustainability Chair. We, Water.org and Inditex, are two very different organizations, but we complement each other tremendously well. As you will probably see from Vedika's speech, we share common values and priorities, such as women empowerment, market orientation, innovation, and transparency. Furthermore, our main common point undoubtedly lies in the essential role water plays in both our organizations. Water is obviously a primary resource for the textile industry. We, at Inditex, are committed to a responsible water consumption. For such purpose, we work closely with a wide range of partners, from non-profit organizations to universities and public administrations. We are constantly on the lookout for cutting-edge processes that ensure a sustainable use of water across the entire value chain, allowing us to be more efficient and preserving marine and freshwater habitats. With respect to our alliance with Water.org, we have been collaborating since 2015 to empower women and families with access to water and sanitation in countries such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, and Latin America. The aim of the program is to increase this access with microcredits to low-income women in developing countries. Through this market-driven model, people in need get access to affordable loans to cover their water and sanitation needs. As a result of our collaboration, more than 2.1 million people have improved their access to water and sanitation. Our partnership gained momentum a few weeks ago with the formalization of a new agreement focused on climate change action. This agreement addresses a significant challenge related to strengthening water supply and sanitation infrastructure worldwide, with the aim of creating social and environmental positive impact. I am sure that Vedika will go deeper into this line of work. Finally, I wanted to highlight as well that the support of Water.org has allowed us to pilot approaches that go beyond traditional philanthropy and have the potential to scale our work in terms of social and environmental programs. In this regard, Water.org represents for us a key partner in our community investment program, accelerating us towards our shared vision of safe water and sanitation for all. Thank you very much.
Moitas grazas, Javier. E agora ten a palabra María Jesús Movilla Fernández, vicerrectora de Responsabilidade Social do Campus de Ferrol da UDC.
Thank you. President of the Social Council of the University of A Coruña, Director of Sustainability Inditex, Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Business, Director of Inditex UDC Sustainability Chief, Chief Operation Officer of Water.org, ladies and gentlemen, good morning everyone. First of all, I apologize for the absence of the Rector of the University of A Coruña. On his behalf, I would like to welcome Vedika Bhandarkar to our university. Our university works every day to be more sustainable, responsible, and environmentally aware. Therefore, having the opportunity to listen to Ms. Bhandarkar is very motivating for the university community present here today. Thank you for coming, Ms. Bhandarkar. To conclude, I would like to thank and congratulate the Inditex UDC Chair for their excellent choice of speaker. I feel this is an important opportunity for the students of the thesis course to learn firsthand how we can change people's lives. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Vicerrectora. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody here at this table. As the chairman of the Social Council of the University of A Coruña, it gives me great pleasure to speak to you today to welcome you all at this conference of the Inditex UDC Sustainability Chair, in which we all have the pleasure of having here Mr. Vedika Bhandarkar, Chief Operating Officer of Water.org, as our special guest. We are very, very pleased to welcome those of you that have been with us before, as well as those who are new to this conference series organized by the Inditex UDC Sustainability Chair, which is one of our crown jewels. In the last decade, national and international professionals and academics linked to nearly 30 renowned companies, universities, and non-profit organizations have participated in this conference series, and more than 1,000 attendees have passed through its classrooms. This important event and the Inditex UDC Sustainability Chart itself are the culmination of an enormous collective effort which began in 2010 when Inditex and the University of A Coruña entered into a collaboration agreement whereby both institutions undertook to implement at the UDC a corporate social responsibility project under the coordination of the Social Council, which I am honored to preside, and the direction and hard and excellent work of the Professor Marta Rey. This chair has become a national benchmark and a key cornerstone of the UDC's strategy for the promotion of sustainability and university social innovation. The agreement between Inditex and UDC represents the best example of public-private cooperation, a strong commitment to social innovation whose excellent results can be seen in the field of lifelong learning, dissemination, and applied research. I would like to thank Ms. Bhandarkar for accepting our invitation to cooperate with our project, as well as to highlight the work that Water.org has been doing for years to raise awareness, innovation, and the research for solutions to fight against the global water crisis, and therefore its commitment to improving the quality of life of people. No doubt, it is a great honor to have the opportunity to listen to our speaker today, considering her interesting experience and the remarkable and positive impact of Water.org's projects worldwide. Ms. Bhandarkar is responsible for the operating efficiency and effectiveness of Water.org and for the attainment of strategic objectives and annual organizational goals. She works closely with the CEO, the executive team, and the president of Water Equity to support the mission and vision of Water.org. She previously served as Water.org Chief Global Impact Officer and the Managing Director, India. Regarding her professional career, Ms. Bhandarkar has more than 25 years of experience building teams and businesses with Indian and international financial institutions. Prior to joining Water.org in January 2016, she served as Vice Chairman and Managing Director at Credit Suisse Securities India Private Limited from 2010 to 2015. Previously, she served as the Managing Director, Head of Investment Banking at JP Morgan. Besides, she serves as an independent director on the boards of several companies. She has also been appointed as a part-time member of the bank's board bureau and serves as a board member of the Jai Vakil Foundation, an institution focused on children and adults with intellectual disabilities. Thank you very much, Vedika, for your presence today at this university. I hope your stay in Spain among us will be pleasant and faith-building. Without further delay, I will give you the floor so you can share with us your experience and vision on the world of water. And once the conference is over, you all will be able to take part in the question time that will be chaired by Professor Marta Ray. Thank you very much, and at your disposal, we will listen to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me today and for the very kind introductions. It's very hard to speak in front of professors and such dignitaries, so I am a little nervous, but I will try my best. I'm honored and delighted to speak about the worth of water. Let me start by telling you about a woman named Chumki Bibi, a mother of two, just like me. Chumki lives in Birbhum in West Bengal, India, with her kids, her father-in-law, and her husband. Her husband has a steady income as a stone worker, but just his income is not enough for the entire family. So their best hope for bettering their life is for Chumki Bibi to work as well. And she does have a job. She rolls bidis, which are like thin cigarettes. But she could never work full days because of just one simple thing: water. There was no water in her home. And Chumki needed lots of water to drink, to bathe herself, to bathe her children, to cook for the family, to clean. If water is abundant for you, like it is in this state, it's very easy to forget how much water a human being needs to get through her day. And Chumki Bibi cares for 5 human beings. Since she's a woman, getting the water was considered her job. So every day, after waking her children up, after cooking breakfast for the family, instead of going to work, she walked and walked and walked. Just reaching the community collection point took her half an hour. Sometimes, at long last, Chumki would reach the collection point to find the tap dry. On those days, she had to keep walking and to keep searching for water. Every step she took was another she had to retrace with 18 kilograms or 40 pounds of water in tow. Every step she took was time away from her family and time away from her work. Even on the good days, the entire journey to and from the community collection point took an hour. It would be as if you started off for water when this conference started at noon and did not arrive at home until just now. Assuming a traditional 40-hour work week, by the end of each year, Chumki Bibi would have spent the equivalent of 2 months of work walking for water as her full-time job. To make matters worse, the water she got sometimes was unclean, carrying diseases. And she and her family would never know whether the water was unclean until they drank it. This is what life is like when you do not have ready access to water at your home. Let me tell you one more story. This one is about a woman named Mary Babu and her daughter Rosie, who I met in the Tiruvallur district of Tamil Nadu, again in India. Every day began the same way. Both Mary and Rosie got up while it was still dark so that they could relieve themselves in the fields. In order to avoid exposing themselves in daylight, women would keep from eating and drinking throughout the day so that they would not have to go to the toilet. And when they did have to go, they simply lived with the pain. I can't tell you how many times women have said to me, "The whole day, we're just holding." This life was all that Mary Babu and her daughter had ever known. But then, in order to send her daughter to a better school, Rosie was sent to live with her relatives in a larger town, where she finally had access to a toilet at home. Suddenly, she was healthier because she was able to eat and drink without worry. Suddenly, for the first time in her life, she could sleep throughout the night. She did not have to start every day in fear and discomfort and indignity. She could go whenever her body insisted. She was free. When it was time for Rosie to come home for the summer vacation, the thought of returning to her old life, to searching for sanitation every day, was just too much to bear. So one day, Rosie called her mother and said, "I'm not coming home. I just cannot face coming home." Imagine hearing that from your own daughter. That is what life is like when you do not have access to a toilet at home. This is a crisis. Hearing such stories breaks my heart. Yet I know that the pain I feel is just a tiny portion of the pain caused every day by the global water crisis. In order to feel its full weight, you have to multiply this by hundreds of millions. Because there are 771 million people today living in Chumki Bibi's reality. 771 million, 1 in every 10 people on the planet, lacks access to safe water. And there are 1.7 billion people living Mary Babu's reality. 1.7 billion, 1 in every 4 people in the world, lacks access to a toilet. So you can see that calling this is a water crisis is no exaggeration. You can measure this in terms of dollars lost. Every year, lack of basic water and sanitation costs the world's economies $260 billion every year. You can measure it in terms of time lost. Collectively, women and girls walk 200 million hours every day to collect water. Just think about it, 200 million hours every day. As UNICEF's global head of water once noted, and I quote, "It would be as if a woman started walking with her empty bucket in the Stone Age and did not arrive home with water until 2016. That's how much time of women is wasted every single day. Or you can measure it in terms of lives lost. Waterborne diseases kill more children than malaria, measles, and HIV/AIDS combined. More people die from unsafe water and sanitation than from all forms of violence, even war. We cannot accept this. We must act. But you know what? This is not just a water problem. Recently, the Davos agenda of the World Economic Forum put it very succinctly. They said, to make progress on all global challenges, start with water. Clean water is the most fundamental and valuable resource and ultimately underpins the success or failure of every other challenge we face. SDG 6, as Professor Mata mentioned, the goal that pushes the world to ensure that every person on this planet has access to safe water and safely managed sanitation, influences at least 7 other Sustainable Development Goals. It influences SDG 2, the goal for zero hunger. Remember that agriculture accounts for 70% of the use of fresh water worldwide, and in fact, in some geographies, including my own country, India, it can go up to 80 to 90%. It influences SDG 3, the goal for better health and well-being. I talked about the illnesses. Almost 300,000 children die under the age of 5 every year due to waterborne diseases. It influences SDG 5, gender equality. Women and girls are responsible for water collection in 80% of the households that lack water on their premises. I talked about women and girls walking 200 million hours every day to collect water. Girls drop out of school because they're helping their mothers to collect water. It influences SDG 9, industrial productivity. The World Economic Forum has ranked water stress as a top 5 global risk in terms of impact for the past 5 years. Inadequate access to water for an industry or for a company impacts operational capacity, it impacts supply, profit margins, as well as the reputation of the company. SDG 6 also impacts SDG 13, the goal for climate action. Water production, we might not know this, but water production has a large impact on carbon dioxide generation. As an example, 76 million tons per annum of carbon dioxide are produced during desalination. SDG 6 also impacts SDG 15, the goal for life on land. Human beings buy 1 million plastic bottles a minute. About half of them are for drinking water, and only 10% or so are recycled. Think about that. And finally, SDG 6 also impacts SDG 16, the goal for peace. 700 million people could be displaced by 2030 if no alternatives or if no alternative solutions for securing water are found. So as you can see, water does underpin the success or failure of every major problem that the world faces. According to the World Bank, it will take $114 billion every year in order to build the infrastructure we need to solve the water crisis by 2030. Where will this money come from? If you add up all the money being spent on ending the crisis right now, it's about $28 billion a year, which leaves a very large annual funding gap of $86 billion. In other words, we need 3 times the funding we have right now. At water.org, our mission is to close that gap. We try to stretch every dollar, every euro being spent on the water crisis as far as it can go, so that the gap between the funds we need and the funds we have gets smaller and smaller until it no longer exists. So how do we do that? We work with financial institutions that provide small loans at affordable terms so that the people themselves can invest in long-term solutions. Now, I know that's not the people's first instinct when it comes to a problem like this. When most of us hear a story like Chumki Bibi's, our instinct is simply to give as much as we possibly can to end her burden. Rarely do we think of people living in poverty themselves contributing money to a solution. After all, we think if they could, wouldn't they have done so already? Well, consider this. The majority of people without water, access to safe water or sanitation, are already paying substantially for it. They're not only paying with their time, they're not only paying with their health, but they're also paying with their money. They're buying water from vendors in informal settlements in slums at rates which are 10 to 15 times higher than what all of us pay for tap water. They're paying 15, 20, even 25% of their income, while you and I pay less than 1 to 2% of our income for water. They're emptying their savings to buy medicines when dirty water gives their kids diarrhea. They're even paying sometimes every day to use public latrines. And of course, they're losing their wages when they spend their days collecting water. Add all of these costs up, and these coping costs amount to a staggering $300 billion per year. Remember how much I said we'd need to end the global water crisis? We would need $114 billion per year. So if we can just redirect some of these coping costs towards people investing in permanent solutions in their own homes, we'll go a long way towards closing the financing gap. And these solutions are out there. They're out there often for a very reasonable price. In slums, often water utility pipes run underneath the feet of people who cannot access it. A few $100s can get you a tap connected to these pipes, or a toilet that feeds back to the central sewer system, or a decentralized fecal sludge management system. In rural areas, a few $100s can often provide solutions like a water storage tank, a toilet, or a small family well. If enough people in the community are willing to take out loans together, it can even signal to a water utility that there are customers waiting if they bring these services out to a new area. So for people living in poverty, investing in these solutions is an incredibly smart financial move. They've simply never had the access to the loans that could make this possible. The conventional wisdom was that they'd never be able to pay back a loan that did not directly generate income, so microlenders would not lend to them. Gary White and Matt Damon, who started Water.org, believed that the conventional wisdom was wrong. So we've spent the last decade and a half developing a program called Water Credit, where we work with financial institutions and help them set up water and sanitation lending portfolios. In the past decade, we've helped 43 million people attain lasting water and sanitation solutions in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Half of our total impact has been achieved just in the past 3 years. 88% of the people we've reached are women, and 86% live below the poverty line. And our domestic financial partners in these countries have catalyzed a total of $3.5 billion in capital. The reason that water credit works so well is that it creates a market. It connects people ready and willing to pay for a service with people ready and willing to make a living by providing it. And once that happens, we don't have to keep pushing to make it work. Think of it like a ball. So it's like nudging a ball that's standing at the top of a slope. Once it starts rolling, the market will create the momentum it needs to sustain itself. So a big focus for us now is removing the systemic barriers that could slow or stop the market's momentum. In some cases, the barrier that keeps more lenders from offering these services is simply a lack of understanding that water and sanitation loans really do generate returns. Now that we have such a solid evidence base, we're sharing it with even more types of lenders, from local self-help groups to cooperatives to microfinance institutions to commercial banks, private sector banks, government banks, to cutting-edge digital financial providers. We're working with all of them to make sure that everyone knows that these loans are a viable business. In other cases, the barrier is the lack of capital. In order for financial institutions to offer these loans at affordable rates, they themselves need to be able to borrow money at affordable rates, and that's not always the case. So a few years ago, Water.org created Water Equity, the first ever asset management firm dedicated to ending the global water crisis. Water Equity brings together investors across sectors who want to use their money to both make a return as well as generate a big impact. The first fund which Water Equity raised was in 2016. It raised $11 million. That fund aims to reach 1 million people with safe water or sanitation over its 7-year term. 1 million people like Chumki Bibi and Mary Babu. Investors started seeing that their money was changing lives, and they received a higher financial return than expected. So after that impressive performance, Water Equity raised a second fund, nearly 5 times the size of the first, at $50 million, and a third fund, which they just announced financial close of $153 million. So Water Equity now has committed capital of over $200 million and has, through its investments, already enabled more than 2.7 million people to get access to safe water or sanitation. And finally, sometimes simple policy decisions get in the way of these markets. So Water.org, we've been working with policymakers from local officials at the municipality or the village level, to state governments, to national governments, to large multilateral organizations like the World Bank, the UNICEF, to ensure that the regulations and policies encourage funding for water and sanitation solutions. As our momentum builds, we'll be able to stretch every dollar and every euro even further. Globally, as I told you, we've reached over 43 million people. 43 million people like Chumki Bibi and Mary Babu. And speaking of those two, let me tell you the rest of their stories. Chumki Bibi heard about water credit a few years ago and took out a $250 loan in Indian rupees to build a tap in her home. As soon as it was installed, she not only got water flowing, she got back 2 months' worth of working hours every single year. all of a sudden, Chimki Bibi had more time to spend with her family and she had more time to work. Her income went up by 30%. Why? Because of a water tap. And Mary? Around the time her daughter Rosie said she would not come home, Mary heard about water and sanitation loans. When she recalled this moment to me, I remember it really clearly. In the village, she had so much pride. She said, I had to see my daughter. There was no question. So she applied for a $300 loan, again in Indian rupees, and built a toilet. For the first time in her life, she did not have to start her days stumbling to dangerous fields. She had privacy, she had safety, she could listen to and meet her body's needs, and best of all, every vacation, Rosie finally came home. Water.org has been incredibly fortunate to partner with Inditex for 7 years now. We're very grateful to Inditex. Through our partnership that started in 2015, 2.1 million lives have changed in Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, and Latin America. $218 million in domestic capital has been catalyzed. And we've been able to show up at regional and international forums and partner with multiple stakeholders to continue to advocate for this water sanitation and hygiene, or WASH, agenda. Now, all of this sounds good and positive, and it is, and no one would fault us for continuing to address this issue from the bottom up by partnering with more financial institutions in more countries and meeting the demand for water and sanitation loans at the household level. Incidentally, this total demand has been estimated at $18 billion. And given that we've catalyzed $3.5 billion so far, we have a long way to go. We will continue to do this, of course, but we will not stop here. Why? And you might ask, why do something more? And the reason is climate change and the impact of climate change on both water availability and quality.
কিনে আনতে হয় জল বাইরে তো ওই প্ল্যান্টটাতে কিনে এনে খেতে হয় বর্ষা হলে বর্ষা জল দিয়ে রান্না করি আর বর্ষা না হলে তখন পুকুরিতে আনতে হয় অনেক দিন ধরে আনতে বর্ষা হলে তখন এই যায় ধরি এই যে কাগজ ইয়ে পাতা এই জল পড়ে এই জল দিয়ে রান্না করি আমি আনি আর এখন আমার যাও অসুস্থ বলে আনতে পারে না আমারই আনতে হয় জল ভ্যান করে দিতে গেলে টাকা লাগে এই যায় খাতে গেলে হচ্ছে কিনে কিনে খাইতে টাকা নয় কি করতে পুকুরের টাইনতে হয় টাকা নিয়ে গেলে পুকুরের টাইনে খাইতে টাকা যখন না থাকে তখন ওই ঘুমটা পুকুরের টাইনে ওই ফিল্টারে দেওয়া হয় দিল্লি খাওয়া খাইতে হবে
ধান চাষ হতো সবজি চাষ হতো বিভিন্ন ফল ফলা গাছে চা চলতো এলাকা মানুষ সব শান্তি সুন্দরভাবে চলতে করতো কিন্তু আইলা হওয়ার পরে সিডার হওয়ার পরে বুলবুলি নদী ঘেরে কোনো চাষই কোনো মাছই হয় না তো মাঝে ওই যে ভাঙল ছিল ভাঙল টান দেশে তার মধ্যে আমরা খুব মানে টেনশনে ছিলাম যে কী হবে, কোনে যাব, কীভাবে ঘর দরজা, এই খরচ করি, গরিব মানুষ এই খরচ করি ঘর দরজা করা, এখন যদি নদীতে চলে যায় তাহলে থাকবো কোথায় বা খাবো কি, এনে খুব রাত্রি খাওয়া ঘুম হতো না, খুব টেনশন হতো।
As you saw in this video, climate change is here, it is real, and it is impacting the most vulnerable the hardest. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to visit one of our partners in Ethiopia. During the visit, we met a few of their clients in a couple of different villages where they were actively providing water and sanitation loans. One of the people I met with was a farmer. He had been farming his entire life. He was over 70 years old. Through an interpreter, I asked him about water. We talked about how his family used to fetch water every day from the river some distance away, and a recent loan that they'd taken out for a nearby hand pump and well. He said they were doing this because they wanted to reduce the burden of fetching water on his wife and daughters, and because the water in the river was not consistently available anymore in the dry season. I asked him about the seasons. When did they start? Where did he get his water from? It took him a minute or two to answer. He said that all of his life, he could tell within a week or two when the rainy season would begin, when the rainy season would end, and he never worried much about having water for his crops. Now, though, he couldn't say, or according to the interpreter, he said it's when God decides. He went on to say that he was struggling with not knowing when to plant and harvest, nor how much yield to expect. There were always good and bad years, he said, as farmers know, but now he was questioning whether farming was something he really wanted for his kids. Incidentally, over 80% of Ethiopians are involved in agriculture, and agriculture accounts for nearly half of the country's economy. The country which you saw in the video, a few years ago, I visited some villages in Bangladesh to learn more about their water and sanitation conditions. These were small villages spread across many acres of rice fields. We were walking along the paths between these fields, exactly like how that farmer was walking. Most of the fields were covered in water at that time. We stopped at a few houses along the way to talk to people. Occasionally, I would see an open pit area or a tiny shack that people would use or used to use for defecating, for going to the toilet. In one community, a different NGO had educated villagers about sanitation and hygiene and encouraged people to construct their own toilets. The quality and use was clearly all over the place since this happened. The good news was that most of the people wanted better toilets, and it seemed that some were willing and able to finance latrines with a pit, a pan, a good base, a solid structure, and a small vent. But the challenges they mentioned were they didn't know where to dig and how to stop flooding and spillover of the waste in the pits. The area had flooded more regularly recently, and it was tough finding high enough ground for pits. Floods would later wash away some of the latrines people constructed with their own money, which is why so many of them were in bad shape and were not being used. A country of over 165 million people, about 2/3 of Bangladesh sits less than 20 feet or below sea level. At least these communities that I visited were inland. Tens of thousands of people who live on the coast are forced to leave every year as sea levels have risen and tidal flooding has become much more extreme. So as you can see, both droughts and floods are exacerbating water scarcity as well as water quality, and thereby negatively impacting people's health and productivity. The people who are least responsible for the climate change are unfortunately the most affected. Water availability is becoming less predictable in many places, and increased incidences of flooding are threatening to destroy water points and sanitation facilities and contaminate water sources. Around 74% of natural disasters between 2001 and 2018, a 20-year period, were water-related, including droughts and floods. The frequency and intensity of such events is only expected to increase with further climate change. Ensuring that everyone has access to sustainable water and sanitation services is a critical climate change mitigation strategy for the years ahead. By 2040, almost 1 in 4 children will live in areas of extremely high water stress. Up to 3 billion people will experience chronic water scarcity by 2050. Thanks to the most recent generous gift from Inditex, Water.org will now focus on the problem top-down. We will expand our work with the infrastructure providers, i.e., the water utilities. Our interventions will address barriers on both the demand and the supply side, including private and public water utilities, enterprises focused on water and sewage treatment, wastewater management, water loss reduction, and safely managed sanitation infrastructure. What will we do with these utilities? We will help them become much more bankable, much more financeable, so that they're able to attract capital that enables them to expand their networks and serve the currently unserved or the underserved. The capital will come from both the local markets and it will also come from Water Equity, our sister organization. Let me also talk about an issue that does not get much focus. This is the issue of the leaking pipes. Do you know that on an average, more than 30% of water pumped from a utility leaks out of the pipes and into the ground? These losses deplete resources, they reduce the services for a customer, and harm the utility's financial performance. Water leakage wastes substantial kilowatt hours of energy that produces greenhouse gas emissions. One particularly exciting example, which we're very excited about in our work, is water loss reduction that connects human impact, water volume, energy savings, infrastructure, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll do this with providing coordinated technical expertise to lower the water losses, structuring the capital as performance based on percentage of water saved, and measure how the reduction of non-revenue water impacts access, availability, energy, and carbon reduction in carbon emissions. We expect that some of these reductions could be as much as baseline reduction of 40%, reduction in water loss, conservation of water per year, reduction of CO2 emissions, as well as savings in terms of kilowatt hours per year. Now, working with utilities is not new, and we've been doing this for some time in Southeast Asia and Brazil. So let me tell you a small story from Indonesia. You see this lady here. Water.org started partnering with the Pidam district of Batang in Indonesia in September 2016. We started providing capacity building assistance to the Pidam. Pidam is incidentally a municipal or a city utility. And we helped the utility become operationally stronger, as well as facilitated access to capital from domestic banks to improve operations as well as increase the coverage. One of the customers that benefited from this expanded coverage of the Pidam is Mrs. Tiatun. Mrs. Tiatun lives in Tulis, district of Batang. She lives with her family, consisting of her mother and her 2 children. Before they had a water connection at her house, Mrs. Tiatun and her family, to get their water for drinking water, they used to go to the local mosque. The mosque had a well. But for all the other needs, they used to go to the river to get water for bathing, to get water for washing their clothes. Mrs. Tiatun learned from the Water.org's utility partner, the Pidam district of Batang, that she could get a connection and she could pay for the connection in installments. She was able to install a sink and a water tap in her kitchen, and finally had a way to give her family safe water at home affordably. These examples demonstrate the potential for investments to create ripples of impact far beyond the family's reach directly. As infrastructure is improved, people in disadvantaged communities will reap the benefits, as will the environment around them. And while we will scale up our work with utilities globally, we will also continue expanding access to safe water and sanitation services at the household level, because gaining access is part of the critical climate change mitigation strategy. So the last example for today is from Mexico City. It's of Ernestina Veronica Romero Cruz, who lives in the Tlapan municipality that's located in the southernmost part of the city. Ernestina hardly gets running water and has to purchase water from water trucks. They have to travel down to the municipal offices downtown to purchase the water trucks every time they need water, and then they have to haul the truck to their neighborhood where they need to have enough storage tanks. When there's good water, the truck arrives in 3 or 4 days. But when it is dry season, it takes up to a month or month and a half to get water. Ernestina decided to take matters in her own hands and set up a roof rainwater harvesting system at the house. She mentioned that before she set the system up, she washed her clothes little by little, and they would pile on for weeks or even months, but not now. Now she collects the rainwater, and the same day she washes everything dirty, if it's clothes, vessels, whatever. The family bathes every day without worrying that they only have a bucket of water. They have water in the toilet. And her plan now is to start planting in her small yard and have her crops, tomatoes, onions, peppers, and carrots, and be able to water them regularly. Ernestina, without knowing these fancy words, but she was able to obtain climate resilience access to meet her family's needs. What this tells me, that if we can expand even some of these strategies, then within our lifetimes, the suffering that Chumki Bibi, Mary Babu, Mrs. Tiatun, and Ernestina experienced will only exist in stories. I mentioned that I'm a mother. Sometimes I imagine what it might be like if my daughter winds up having a daughter of her own someday. And I have to explain to my granddaughter the work that her grandmother used to do. I'll explain that when I was raising her mother, there were still people without access to safe water and a toilet. My granddaughter won't know that, because in her world, it will not be true. I'll tell her that because we solved this problem, the world she knows is cleaner, healthier, more prosperous. I'll tell her because we solved it, girls like her are not being kept away from school. And women like her mom are not being kept away from work. Because we solved it, children like her are no longer needlessly dying. I imagine I'll be sitting there, marveling at how the world has changed so quickly, while my granddaughter marvels that it was ever any other way at all. Thank you.